I've always been the practical one in my family. While my older brother Bart was busy chasing his dreams of becoming a successful businessman, I focused on climbing the corporate ladder step by step. That approach finally paid off when I landed a position at Crawford Associates, with a salary that made my previous job look like pocket change. The only downside? The commute was killing me. 2 hours each way meant I was spending 4 hours a day just getting to and from work. After 2 weeks of this nightmare, I knew I had to find a place closer to the office. That Saturday, I went to my parents' house for our traditional family dinner. Mom was in the kitchen, stirring something that smelled amazing, while Dad sat in his favorite armchair reading the newspaper. It felt like every other Saturday dinner we'd had since I was a kid. "How's the new job going, honey?" Mom asked as she placed a steaming casserole on the table. "Actually, really good," I replied, helping her set the table. "The only problem is the commute. I'm looking for a new place to rent closer to work." That's when I noticed my parents exchange one of those looks they'd perfected over their 30 years of marriage. Mom wiped her hands on her apron and sat down. "You know, Amber," she said, "we might have a solution for you. Remember Grandma Helen's old apartment? The one I inherited? Our tenants just moved out last week, and it's literally a 5-minute walk from your new office." I nearly dropped the fork I was holding. Of course, I remembered that apartment. I'd spent countless weekends there as a kid when Grandma Helen was still alive. It was a cozy 2-bedroom place in a quiet neighborhood with huge windows and a small balcony where Grandma used to grow her beloved petunias. "How much would the rent be?" I asked, trying not to sound too eager. Mom named a figure that made my eyes widen. It was about 1.5 times less than the average market price in that area. "We'd give you a family discount, of course," she added with a smile. "I'll take it," I said immediately, not even trying to negotiate. The location was perfect, and the price was unbeatable. "That's settled then," Dad said, finally looking up from his newspaper. "Now, did you hear about your brother's latest success? He just landed 3 new corporate clients for his courier company. He's really making it big in the delivery business." And just like that, the conversation shifted to their favorite topic, Bart's achievements. I sat there, pushing food around my plate, nodding at appropriate intervals as my parents gushed about how their son was becoming a successful entrepreneur. It was always like this. Bart was the golden child, the risk-taker, the one who dared to dream big. I was just Amber. Moving day was surprisingly quick. The real shock came when I walked into Grandma Helen's apartment with the first box in my hands. The place was, let's just say the previous tenants hadn't exactly treated it like their own. The walls were covered in dated wallpaper that was peeling at the corners. There were mysterious stains on the ceiling, and the only piece of furniture was this ancient sofa that looked like it had survived several wars. I called Mom that evening, sitting cross-legged on that old sofa, the only place to sit in the entire apartment. "Hey, Mom, would it be okay if I did some renovations?" She sounded distracted, probably watching one of her cooking shows. "Oh, sure, honey, just don't make it too bright. You know how I feel about those trendy neon colors everyone's using these days." I had to laugh at that. "Mom, have you ever seen me wear anything brighter than navy blue? Trust me, I'm thinking more along the lines of earth tones and neutrals." That night, I dove deep into the internet, browsing through interior design websites and Pinterest boards. I created a whole mood board with my vision: warm grays, soft beiges, and the occasional deep blue accent. Everything would be understated but elegant, comfortable but put together, just like me, I guess. The next few months became a blur of work and renovation. I'd come home from the office, change into old clothes, and get to work. First came the wallpaper removal. Then there was the painting, which taught me that just one more coat is rarely just one more coat. Furniture shopping became my new weekend hobby. I'd spend hours in stores testing sofas, measuring spaces, and comparing prices. Piece by piece, I built my home. A comfortable gray sectional that was perfect for movie nights, a solid wood dining table that could seat 6, a plush area rug that tied everything together. The transformation took 6 months of weekends and evenings. But finally, it was done. Looking around at my finished apartment, I felt a surge of pride so strong it almost brought tears to my eyes. I had done this. When Mom came to see the finished result, I was nervous. She walked through each room slowly, running her hand along the new kitchen countertops, examining the carefully chosen light fixtures, studying the subtle pattern on the wallpaper in the bedroom. "Amber," she said finally, turning to face me. "This is remarkable." I nearly fell over. Mom wasn't exactly free with her compliments, especially when it came to me. But there she was, actually smiling, actually impressed. "You did all this yourself?" she asked, gesturing around the living room. I nodded, trying not to look too pleased with myself. "Well, YouTube tutorials helped a lot." "It's beautiful," she said, and then she did something she hadn't done in years. She hugged me. A real hug, not one of those quick, obligatory ones she usually gave me at family gatherings. 2 weeks later, I headed to another family dinner, practically bouncing with excitement. I'd gotten a promotion at work, senior account manager, with a nice salary bump and my own team to lead. I couldn't wait to share the news. "Mom, Dad," I said during a lull in the conversation, "I have some good news. I got promoted at work." Mom barely glanced up from her plate. "That's nice, dear?" She turned to Dad, her voice dropping. "Have you heard from Bart today?" And that's when the real dinner conversation started. Turned out, my brother's courier company was in trouble. A bigger competitor had moved into town. Some national chain with fancy tracking apps and lower prices. Bart's clients were jumping ship faster than rats from a sinking vessel. "We're going to help him," Dad announced, pushing his plate away. "We've decided to take out a loan." I nearly choked on my water. "A loan? Look, maybe this is actually an opportunity. If he can't compete with this bigger company, maybe it's time to try something else. Starting over might be better than throwing good money after bad." The silence that followed was deafening. Mom and Dad exchanged one of their looks, not the fond ones they usually shared, but the kind that said they were disappointed in me. Again. "You don't understand business, Amber," Dad said finally, his voice curt. "You've always played it safe with your office jobs. Your brother is an entrepreneur. He takes risks." "Family always helps family," Mom added firmly. "That's what we do." I opened my mouth to argue, then closed it again. What was the point? They'd already made up their minds. I could have told them I'd discovered the cure for cancer, and they'd still be more concerned about Bart's delivery vans. The next 6 months were like watching a slow-motion car crash. Mom would call occasionally to update me on the situation, though I never asked. The loan they took out bought Bart some new vans and helped him lower his prices, but it wasn't enough. The competitor kept expanding, kept taking clients, kept pushing their fancy app and next-day delivery promises. Then came the call I'd been expecting all along. "Your brother's company went bankrupt," Mom said, her voice tight with emotion. "He and Sarah have moved in with us, temporarily, just until they get back on their feet." I gripped my phone tighter, thinking about my quiet prediction at that dinner 6 months ago. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, "because what else could I say? I told you so." "They're sleeping in your old room," Mom continued. "Sarah's taking it pretty hard. You know how she is about appearances." Yeah, I knew how my sister-in-law was. Sarah had always looked down her nose at my simple office job, preferring to remind everyone at family gatherings that she was married to a CEO. I wondered how she was handling living with her in-laws now. That weekend, I drove to my parents' house, telling myself it was just another family dinner. But as soon as I walked through the door, the tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife. Bart was sprawled on the living room couch, scrolling through his phone. He barely looked up when I entered, offering only a grunt that might have been, "Hey." Sarah was perched on the armchair like she was sitting on a throne, her designer handbag placed carefully at her feet. She gave me one of her trademark looks, the kind that suggested I was something she'd found stuck to her shoe. "Dinner's ready," Mom called, and we all gathered around the table. I should have known better than to hope for a quiet meal. Bart launched into what felt like a rehearsed speech about his business troubles before I'd even picked up my fork. "I had everything under control," he insisted, gesturing with his knife. "The business was growing. We were expanding. Then these corporate vultures moved in with their fancy technology and deep pockets. They probably spent millions on marketing. How is a small business supposed to compete with that?" Sarah added, pushing her food around her plate. "Exactly!" Bart slammed his hand on the table, making the glasses rattle. "They're just bullies with bigger budgets. And don't get me started on those idiots at the bank who wouldn't extend our credit line. Complete morons who wouldn't know a good business opportunity if it bit them in the—" "Maybe," I interrupted, unable to help myself. "This is just how business works. Competition is part of the game. You have to plan for these possibilities when you start a company." The silence that followed was absolute. 4 pairs of eyes stared at me like I'd just suggested we should all start eating rocks for breakfast. "Plan?" Bart sneered. "Easy for you to say from your cushy office job. What do you know about running a real business?" "I just think—" I started, but Dad's warning look made me shut my mouth. I focused on my plate instead, pushing my peas into neat little rows. "I can't take living here much longer," Sarah announced suddenly, her voice dripping with dissatisfaction. "No offense," she added, not sounding sorry at all, "but I need my own space." Bart immediately perked up like a puppet on strings. "Hey, Mom, what about Grandma Helen's old apartment? You still own that, right?" My head snapped up. "I'm living there," I said quickly, "and I've renovated it completely." "Oh, yes," Mom nodded, suddenly animated. "Amber's done a wonderful job with the place. It looks absolutely beautiful now." I saw the look that passed between Bart and Sarah, quick, calculating, meaningful. Something cold settled in my stomach, but I pushed the feeling away. I was being paranoid. They wouldn't— would they? Wednesday evening, I was coming home from work, my mind already on the leftovers waiting in my fridge and the new Netflix series I'd been saving. But when I reached my floor, I stopped dead in my tracks. There were voices coming from my apartment, familiar voices. I opened my door to find Mom, Bart, and Sarah standing in my living room like they owned the place. Sarah was running her hand along the new curtains I'd hung just last month. "Mom," I tried to keep my voice steady, "what's going on?" "You could have called to say you were coming over." Mom waved her hand dismissively, not even looking at me. "Don't be ridiculous, Amber. This is my apartment. I don't need permission to visit." My mouth went dry. Something about her tone sent warning bells ringing through my head. I watched as Sarah continued her tour of my apartment, inspecting everything like she was a real estate agent doing an evaluation. She ran her fingers along the new kitchen countertops I'd installed, peered into the freshly painted bathroom, and nodded approvingly at the built-in bookshelves I'd added to the living room. Finally, she settled herself on the sofa, the old one I'd kept from before the renovation, and smiled that cat-got-the-cream smile of hers. "This is perfect. We can move in next week." The world seemed to tilt sideways. "Excuse me? I live here. This is my home. I renovated it." "I'm the owner," Mom cut in, her voice sharp. "I decide who lives here." "But all the work I did—" I gestured around at the walls I'd painted, the floors I'd refinished, the countless hours of labor I'd poured into this place. "I transformed this apartment." "Oh, yes." Mom's smile turned calculating. "Actually, since you've improved the apartment so much, the market value has gone up significantly. If you want to stay, the new rent will be 3 times what you're paying now." The blood drained from my face as everything clicked into place. They'd planned this. Mom knew I couldn't afford triple the rent. My promotion was good, but not that good. "You're trying to force me out," I said, my voice barely a whisper. Mom shrugged, not even bothering to deny it. "If you can't afford the new rent, you should probably start looking for another place. You have a week to move out." Without waiting for my response, they headed for the door. Sarah was already on her phone, presumably making moving plans. Bart hadn't said a word the entire time. He didn't need to. Mom paused in the doorway, but didn't turn around. "1 week?" she repeated, then pulled the door shut behind them. I stood in the middle of my living room, the living room I had painted, decorated, made into a home, and felt the walls closing in. The proud warmth I'd felt showing Mom my renovation just months ago turned to ashes in my mouth. While my family probably expected me to spend that evening crying into my pillow, I was already on my phone, scrolling through rental listings. By midnight, I'd found the perfect place, a modern one-bedroom just 2 blocks from my office. The rent was higher than what I'd been paying Mom, but I didn't care. First thing Thursday morning, I called in sick to work for the first time in 3 years. By 9 a.m., I'd toured the new apartment. By 10 a.m., I'd signed the lease and paid the deposit. The landlord, a no-nonsense woman named Janet, raised an eyebrow when I asked if I could move in immediately. Next stop, a moving company. I found one that specialized in same-day moves and didn't mind paying the rush fee. While waiting for them to arrive, I went through my apartment, no, Mom's apartment, with Post-it notes, marking everything I'd bought with my own money. The movers arrived at 2 p.m. I stood in the living room directing traffic like a conductor. The gray sectional? Mine. The dining table and chairs? Mine. All the kitchen appliances except the stove and fridge? Mine. Those bookshelves I installed myself? They're coming too. Item by item, my things went into the truck. The coffee maker I'd splurged on after my promotion, the memory foam mattress I'd bought during a Black Friday sale, the TV mount I'd installed myself after watching 3 different YouTube tutorials, everything I'd purchased to make this place a home. All of it went into boxes and onto the truck. When they finished, the apartment looked almost exactly as it had the day I moved in. Empty walls, bare floors, and that old sofa sitting alone in the middle of the living room like a captain going down with his ship. I took one last look around, remembering all the weekends I'd spent painting these walls, all the evening hours I'd invested in making this place beautiful. Then I locked the door, dropped my keys in an envelope, and slipped them under my parents' front door on my way to the new apartment. I spent that night setting up my new apartment, arranging furniture until everything felt right. It wasn't until the next morning that all hell broke loose. The calls started at 7 a.m. Mom, Bart, Sarah, Mom again, Bart again. I watched my phone buzz across my new kitchen counter, taking a slow sip of coffee from my relocated coffee maker. After the 6th call, I finally picked up. "How dare you?" Mom's voice exploded through the speaker. "The apartment is completely empty. Your brother and Sarah have nowhere to sleep except that old sofa. You had no right to take all that furniture." I took another sip of coffee, feeling surprisingly calm. Actually, I had every right. I bought everything with my own money. I have all the receipts if you'd like to see them. I left what was there originally, that sofa you were so happy to let me use. There was a moment of silence. Then Mom called me something that would have made Grandma Helen wash her mouth out with soap. The call ended with a click. My phone started buzzing again within 30 minutes of Mom's call, this time with message notifications. Bart and Sarah had apparently tag-teamed to blow up my messenger app. "You vindictive witch." That was from Sarah. "How dare you take everything? You're just jealous because Bart's a real entrepreneur and you're just a paper pusher." Bart's messages weren't any better. "You selfish piece of work. You've always been jealous of my success. Now you're trying to punish us just because we're going through a rough patch. Real classy, sis. Real classy. The messages kept coming, each one more vitriolic than the last. According to my dear brother and his wife, I was greedy, heartless, vindictive, petty, cruel, selfish, and, my personal favorite, a soulless corporate drone who wouldn't know family loyalty if it bit her in the face. I read each message once, then closed the app without responding. Instead of engaging with their drama, I threw myself into settling into my new place. I arranged my furniture, decorated the walls, and started building a new life. A month passed without any contact from my family. I'd love to say I didn't think about them, but that would be a lie. Every now and then, I'd catch myself wondering how they were doing, if they'd managed to furnish the apartment, if Mom still made her famous lasagna for Sunday dinners. But I pushed those thoughts away each time they surfaced. They'd made their choice. Then, exactly 1 month after the move, my phone lit up with Mom's number. I almost didn't answer, but some combination of curiosity and lingering hope made me pick up. "The rent payment didn't come through," she said without preamble, her voice accusatory. I couldn't help it, I laughed. "Of course it didn't. I don't live there anymore, remember? You kicked me out." "That's not the point," Mom snapped. "We're expecting you to continue the payments." "We're having a very difficult time right now, Amber," she said. "We're still paying off the loan we took out for Bart's business, and he can't afford to pay rent right now. The family needs your help." "Let me get this straight," I said slowly, gripping my phone tighter. "You kicked me out of the apartment so Bart and Sarah could move in, and now you want me to keep paying rent for an apartment I'm not living in, just so they can live there for free?" "Family helps family," Mom said, as if that explained everything. "You know we're struggling with the loan payments, and Bart's still trying to get back on his feet." That phrase again. How many times had I heard it over the years? Always when they needed something from me. Never when I needed support myself. Something inside me finally snapped. Really? Is that what family does? Does family kick one child out onto the street to make room for another? Does family take someone's home away and then demand they keep paying for it? "You're being dramatic." "No, Mom, I'm being realistic. For the first time in my life, I'm seeing things exactly as they are. This attitude of yours, family helps family, right? Well, guess what? I'm family, too, or at least I was supposed to be." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. When Mom spoke again, her voice was cold. "I'm very disappointed in you, Amber." I actually laughed at that. "Funny. I was just about to say the same thing to you." I ended the call and immediately blocked her number. Then, in quick succession, I blocked Dad's number, Bart's, and Sarah's. I opened every messaging app on my phone and blocked them there too. For good measure, I went through all my social media accounts and blocked them as well. It felt like cutting off a limb, but somehow I was finally able to breathe. Weeks passed, then months. Through the family grapevine, mainly my cousin Rachel, who'd always been decent to me, I heard bits and pieces about what was happening. Bart had apparently come up with another brilliant business idea, something about artisanal pet food delivery, or maybe it was organic food subscription boxes. Rachel wasn't quite sure. My parents were making the rounds, asking various relatives for startup money. Most of them had enough sense to refuse. Only Uncle Derek, notorious for charging interest rates that would make a loan shark blush, offered to help. Even my parents weren't desperate enough to take him up on that offer. The last thing I heard was that they were considering taking out another loan to fund Bart's latest venture. Rachel told me this over coffee one Saturday, watching me carefully for my reaction. "What do you think about that?" she asked. I stirred my latte, considering the question. 6 months ago, I would have been worried sick. 3 months ago, I would have been angry. Now? "Not my circus, not my monkeys," I said, and was surprised to find I meant it. Rachel grinned. "You seem different," she said. "Happier." I thought about my new apartment, decorated exactly how I wanted it. About my recent promotion at work, the one I'd celebrated with my team instead of my family. about the cooking classes I'd started taking on weekends. Something I'd always wanted to do, but never had time for when I was renovating the old apartment. "I am," I replied. "I really am." Later that evening, I sat on my couch in my apartment, with a glass of wine, thinking about everything that had happened. Mom's words echoed in my head one last time. Family helps family. They were right about one thing: family should help family. But somewhere along the way, they'd forgotten that help should go both ways, that love should be unconditional, that family means supporting each other's growth, not enabling each other's failures. I took another sip of wine and smiled. I had better things to do than try to fix people who didn't want to be fixed. Much better things indeed.